they gave a dispensation for it.
That's what I have heard.
We know who wrote the question. If alligators are cold-blooded,
No, it's not. But I never did.
is alligator warm-blooded or cold-blooded?
Cold-blooded.
He's cold-blooded?
Yes.
Cold-blooded? Oh, well, yeah, then you can.
It's a reptile. I don't know. Amphibian? It's cold-blooded.
You know what? In Byzantine law, in Byzantine law, an alligator could be eaten
No.
on a Friday.
Yeah, something like that. It's cold-blooded, warm-blooded.
Pardon?
Are you looking it up?
I know, some monasteries they eat lobster and shrimp because that was the food of the poor at one time. Now they cost a fortune. So we have a mixed answer on the alligator. That turns out to be an interesting question. Father Artur says that because they're cold-blooded, they could be eaten on Fridays. And
It's meat. It's meat.
but it is meat, yeah.
But the fish also is meat, right?
But the fish is also meat.
Tuna
yeah.
fish is also meat. So,
And they're cold-blooded.
right, so we say the cold-blooded. Yeah.
So I didn't know that.
Good question.
The hard-hitting questions
Whoever
right
wrote
here.
that, very good. That was
You
good.
live with your Orthodox.
Okay. Is it bad to think about the next pope? That is,
Oh.
to like start wishing for the next pope.
Oh.
If you're wishing that this pope would die, yes, that is not a good thing. You should be praying for the pope instead.
Yes, to answer the first question, Father.
Yep.
The National Bishops' Conference says alligator is permissible on Fridays.
Wow.
The Byzantines are right.
The Byzantines.
And only on Fridays.
William Tapia. This is for you. Yeah. That. Stop the boom boom. You have to answer this. Because you brought one of these in tonight.
Yeah.
What? What? Oh.
Why do we venerate relics?
Actually, yeah, we were talking about this. We wanted you to answer this.
Oh, you want me to answer it?
Yeah.
Okay.
There was some technical
And-
specificity.
And why is it not irreverent to create first-class relics?
Yeah.
So we had a priest in our diocese. I always said, don't let him near my casket if I died before him, because he collected relics constantly. So I could just imagine coming to my casket with a hatchet, you know, and just see what he could get off the body. That would be irreverent. So it's not irreverent because why do we venerate relics in the first place? So even in the Jews, they venerated the relics, okay, of saints, of prophets. And the idea of taking out a little part of the bone and in order to make it available for people like William brought tonight, the first-class relic of St. Paul of the Cross, the founder of the Passionists. I have a bunch of relics at home of different saints and blesseds. So the thought is then, you know, it's a way of being intimately linked with someone that we know has gone to heaven. Because the church never decides who has not gone to heaven. All right, we never say that anybody's in hell or purgatory. We do say that someone is in heaven because they have reached, you know, in their lifetime, that level of holiness. And because evidence has come to us through miracles, when people pray to a person asking for God's intercession for a healing, then we have evidence that that person, you know, is living with God in heaven. And that God has given them a special role, okay, by virtue of the miracles. So like when St. Therese of Lisieux died, usually you have to find a couple of miracles. It's very hard. The church is very rigorous on miracles. With St. Therese of Lisieux, they had hundreds and hundreds of proven miracles. So they had to actually choose the best ones instead of looking for, you know, 2 or 3. So that's the idea is, you know, that we have a link with somebody who is in heaven from either a part of their body, a bone, or something that they wore, or something that they own, which are second-class relics. Does that answer you?
Yeah, well, because somebody came up to me with a question that they asked me that, and they were wondering why it wasn't similar, because you know how we're not supposed to spread like ashes if somebody's cremated.
Yes.
So they asked why it wasn't the same thing.
Right, so like spreading ashes, you're throwing someone's remains into the dirt or into the ocean or into the air, which is, even though somebody might have wanted just that, that's wrong because you want to treat the body with reverence because it was a temple of the Holy Spirit. Okay. Number two, I think it's totally unfair to the rest of the people around you to dump ashes into the air from another human being. That's incredibly rude. But the main thing is that the body is a temple of the Holy Spirit, all right? And so, this person, as a temple of the Holy Spirit, really achieved a great level of piety and holiness in their life. Okay? So, does that answer? Anybody else with relics?
Because we were kind of talking about, what if, you had ashes of a relative, and then put them on, a mantle or whatever, and then, venerated it.
No.
It seemed, yeah, I know exactly. It seems weird.
When people do that, people take ashes. It's one reason that the church is so hesitant on cremation. The church was against cremation in the first place because that's what the pagans did. All right, so the Christians had to be separate from pagans. Pagan Romans and Greeks cremated, therefore Christians did not. Then, after the French Revolution in Western Europe, they promoted cremation to deny the afterlife. Okay? And so then cremation became a way of denying God. But the problem is that sometimes people will do that. They have the body cremated and they never come back for the burial. And they keep, and I know people who do this, they keep the ashes in the house and then, well, when I die, my daughter will get her ashes and his, and then she'll have both sets of our ashes. No, my God. It's extremely unhealthy psychologically because you never let go. There's never the mourning never ends. And that's pastoral experience. They don't stop mourning. And they're going to pass it on to their kids. That's really unhealthy. So, okay? All right. Okay, let's put this one away. Put away the ones that I answered. Okay. How will I know if I'm called to be single, married, or pursue a vocation? How can I keep myself focused in the meantime? Okay. How will I know if I'm called to be single, married, or pursue a vocation? Well, if you're called to be married, you're going to fall in love. If you're called to a vocation, the person you're going to fall in love with is God.
No.
Now, some people are not called to either a religious or ordained state or married state. Or they are called to single state. All right? Sometimes it may be that they never feel that they should get married, that there's emotional problems, then that should be worked on. But there are men and women that God calls to be single in the world and still provide an apostolic witness to the world. A married couple witnesses to God through their marriage and their family life. A consecrated or ordained does the same thing through their ministry and their prayer life. And the same thing then for a single person who is really called to be single and dedicated to God. And we have it for women. You can be a consecrated virgin, or even we used to have the office of widow. But we've never had anything like that for men outside of ordination or monastic life. So how do you know? Work with a priest. If you're not sure, if you've got questions in your head that you're trying to bounce around, then call me or call him, and feel free. Yeah, I saw that, Father. Yes, they have to call you. You're the pastor. But no, you can call me, call another priest you're close to, and ask. Meet a couple of times. Bounce ideas back and forth. See what's happening. How do you stay focused? You know what? It's kind of like what the cardinal was saying in there. You know, you have to be focused on life now as well. All right? You can't just think 5 years down the path. Everybody has to focus on the now as well. We have a duty to people around us, to respond to them. Okay? Questions? Okay. All right, now let's stop. Is masturbation ever not a sin? Okay. So masturbation, by definition, means that the man or woman is actively engaged in it. If you wake up and you're in that condition, you have no responsibility for it. Okay? The responsibility is if you remain, if you feed it, and you keep going.
But that's called differently.
Right.
It's called ejaculation.
Right. So that's something that you have no control over. Okay? So a sleeping state, a semi-sleeping state, it's really common in a semi-awake state or semi-sleep state to have that happen for both men and women. So, but if a masturbation by definition is that you have actively decided to do this alone. Why is it sinful to do it alone? Because sexuality is a gift from God that is meant to be shared with one other person, right? Your spouse. And the problem that comes about if people habitually resort to masturbation is it really does affect their psychosexual growth as a person. And it can make life difficult when they do get married. And it can become, sometimes people will use it. They say, well, I have to masturbate, Father, because then it gets rid of the pressures. But 9 out of 10 times, if you're in this group, you feel guilty afterwards. So that's not a good idea to use it for relieving stress, okay? To deal with masturbation in a healthy way is to, what I always tell people in confession is if you're being drawn towards the sin, that's partly because you're lonely, many times because you feel very alone. That's when you pick up the phone and call, all right? Or you start texting people. And you just do it, just say, hi, how are you? I was just thinking about you. What are you doing? And your mind goes in a different direction and you stop the process. Praying to the Virgin Mary, praying to St. Joseph because he chose virginity while being married to Our Lady. Because prayer is a very important tool in keeping our minds on track. Right? And it's a gift. Sexuality is a gift. It's really important in the Bible, the way it's written in Hebrew, when God gives man the power to procreate, it's the same verb as what God has the power to do. And so that procreation, is supposed to be in marriage, and all sexual activity should be in marriage. I know that it's not. The church knows it's not. And there's been thousands and thousands of years of human history where it has not been. But that's the ideal. And the goal is to reach for the ideal. Okay? Comment? Anything? Yeah? I'm good. Okay. She said I'm good. If I am bisexual, am I sinning by existing? No. No one sins by existing. Or only if I choose to act outside of sacramental marriage, then that's a sin, which I just covered with the masturbation. Okay? People's sexuality, they say, is generally determined at an early age. And if that's the case, then you don't have much. You don't have that much control over who you may be. But you have a lot of control over who you act to be, which is the case with anything. All right? I was born a very happy, healthy baby, and then one day my mother noticed that I was not happy, all right? And I'd had a stroke. Well, all right, I had no control over that, but I have control over what to do with it, the rest of my life, how I live my life. All right, in dealing with limitations thereof. And it's the same thing in sexuality. The church would never, ever accept a situation of a marriage where it would be okay for the other spouse to be having relations outside of that marriage with anybody else. Okay? All right? Let's see. This is the type one. In the context of a marriage preparation class, where over 80% of the couples consistently admit they are currently living together, some with children, how do we propose in a convincing way the teaching of the church regarding premarital sex without alienating the couples? Then, assuming you have successfully explained this to them, what do you tell them they should or should not be doing between now and their wedding? That is it acceptable to say that at a bare minimum, if they continue to live together, they should live as brother and sister until the wedding? So I'm going to work my way backwards. Yes, they should live. They're going to live together in the same house. They should live as brother and sister. But that's very dangerous to do because they've been having a sexual relationship for X number of years or months. And so, that's hard. I had a case where a couple was living together. The guy moved in with the girl and her children. And the boy waited outside the bedroom door. When the guy came out in the morning, he said, "Why are you in my mother's bed if you and she didn't go to church yet?" And I said, "What did you do?" And he said, "I packed." And he moved out, right? But out of the voice of babes. The child knew better than the adults did. How do you propose in a convincing way? If you give authentic church teaching from church documents, from the catechism, people then do feel convicted in their heart. That's my own experience over a lot of years. There are always going to be people who are going to go through it pro forma. They're going because the parents want them to get married in church, or the other spouse wants to get married in church. We have no control over that. Why people would come. But the control we have is turning their heads around and getting them to think properly. All right? What was the old song? Love and marriage. Love and marriage, love and marriage. Run together like a horse and carriage. And only after that is there a baby. All right? All human cultures have known this. Our culture is the first one that thinks it has discovered, the right to do whatever one wants to do, no matter who gets hurt. So, in a convincing way, the teaching of the church regarding premarital sex without alienating the couples, the most important thing to do there is to be gentle. And to be humble and not to come across hard and hurtful. Getting on a high horse and telling other people what you're doing is a mortal sin, you're in a state of mortal sin, God is going to punish you for this. They're not going to come back. You got to work with people and bring them to the realization of what they should be doing. Okay? Boy, you guys are quiet now that you got all the questions on paper. Yeah.
So that was my question because
Okay.
I actually have been leading PreK classes for like 20 years. And it is something that I speak on the very first night of PreK.
Yeah, you have to.
And I approach it in a way of the whole class that this is an opportunity for us to evangelize or to re-evangelize couples who may or may not be, there because they really want to and they're dedicated to Jesus and His church.
Yeah.
And I try to approach it in a way to tell them, in a testimony way, it's like my own story, and my own thoughts and on it and stuff.
That's one of the best ways to do it, is testimony
It
from
is.
yourself or bringing in a couple, who has walked that walk already. Yeah, that's really helpful.
That is huge, and we've always tried to do it that way. But I always started out in saying that, where in the Bible, which commandment is it? I ask them.
Right.
Which commandment is it says that thou shalt not have premarital sex? And it's not there. And the way that I kind of, just kind of sum it up, I tell them, I said, okay, Well, God has a plan for us, and an ideal way for us to reach heaven with Him. And that plan for you is through the vocation of marriage. And in that vocation of marriage, He has given us this gift of sex, which is only supposed to be happening between a husband and wife for the purpose of unity and for procreation. Okay? And when we know that plan, which I am explaining to them, and trying to teach them, that this is why you're here, this is what it's about.
Right.
If we know that plan and we go against that plan, it's like saying, commandment number 11, I'm not going to do. And so the good news is so that you're here today, that me speaking to the couple say, you're here today with regards to something was not right and you want to make it right now. So you're on the right path now. And the church welcomes you back, and Jesus is up in heaven and He is dancing because you're here and you're making this right in your life today.
Right.
And we are here to welcome you back. And if this is you and you're doing this, this is why it's wrong, but we're not here to beat you up, as I say, to say that you're going to hell. We're happy that you're here. We're happy that you're going to make this right. And, and hopefully, down the road that you're going to pass this teaching on to your own children so that your own children will not make maybe the same mistakes you have. And then I tell them, though, guess what? Not only do you're going to make this great sacrament of marriage, but before you go to this sacrament of marriage, you need to go to the sacrament of reconciliation.
Right.
And we talk about that as well. Is that kind of the approach that you're saying that we should be doing with these couples?
That's what you have to do. And I think that when people are reminded, you don't build a fire outside of the fireplace. Sexual activity is supposed to be bringing you together forever. And that the church is the body that has taught that consistently, of the beauty of it, and that we recognize it as beautiful. And because it's so beautiful, it should be, when you're committed, truly committed, in a covenant relationship with each other and with God through the power of the sacrament. A lot of times, people have never heard it before.
They haven't. A lot of them have not heard of it. And all they know is that, they have been told that premarital sex is bad and that they shouldn't do it, but everybody's doing it,
So why not?
Why not? Let's move into that. And I mean, that's what they know. But I think that a lot of people, sometimes when they hear the message and they hear it in the right way, it does touch hearts and sometimes changes minds.
What I like, in the archdiocese is they bring in, and for like teaching the NFP, they bring in couples. And that's so important rather than just one person. It has to be couples. And having couples at a marriage prep, I was blessed my last years as pastor because the deacon and his wife did the marriage prep. And they had been together for, over 25 years. So, and could plug into the archdiocesan program. And I think a lot of times that carries more weight than me.
Yeah, I think like you said, testimony is a huge way to help that. I don't know if you guys remember, I know the couple that we used to present the NFPs has been here, Patricia and Nathaniel Hall.
Yeah.
They are a couple that come to our PreK.
They're awesome.
And they are awesome, and it was our PreK that they came to, and that's where she started her conversion. Was our PreK class. It wasn't because of me, it was somebody who presented at my PreK. But
they are an
where
awesome
her conversion
couple.
story started.
Oh, you're just moving the camera. Well, this is yours as well. In the Apostles' Creed, it says that after Jesus died, He descended into hell before He was raised on the third day. Why did He have to go to hell? Well, He didn't go to hell. It's a terrible mistranslation in English. It's a lousy, lousy translation. It's Sheol. He goes to the dead, right, in Peter. And He goes to the dead and He proclaims the good news, right, that He has come and that He is going to rise and that the gates of heaven are open. In the Byzantine church, the resurrection icon is not Jesus coming out of the tomb. It's Jesus in Sheol, and He lifts Adam and Eve up, and then there's John the Baptist David, Solomon, the prophets, and then there's just all these halos, as far as you can see. That's where he went. He goes to announce to the dead.
But actually, in Old Slavonic, we don't have this version.
No, it's in the Apostles' Creed, which isn't used in Old Slavonic at all. In Old Slavonic, we only use the Creed of
He
Nicaea.
died, he was buried, and then he arose.
Right,
on
that's the
third day.
Nicene Creed, yeah. But in English, this Apostles' Creed is very popular in English-speaking countries, and it's just a bad translation. Yeah, but that's something that everybody always asks, because of the bad translation. I wish the bishops in America or of the whole English-speaking conference would come up with a better translation than that. In Roman Catholicism, in exorcism, they say the prayers in Latin. How come they say it in Latin and not in the language of the people, since God understands all languages? Is that, I don't know for the Roman Church at all, for exorcism. Is the prayer said in Latin?
All of it's done in Latin.
All of it's done in Latin. Okay. All right, so since that is the case, then why, and not in the language of the people, since God understands all languages? I don't know why they do it all. Do you know?
Yeah.
That's something out of my experience.
It's basically, it's like one of the final steps to determine whether the person is actually possessed or not. Because obviously,
It's a dead
yeah,
language.
it's a dead language. So if they are possessed, the person would react to Latin. And I mean, that's really the only reason. I mean, God does understand all languages, but not all people understand Latin.
It's forgetting the devil,
Yeah.
to show that it's really the devil.
Yes.
What language are the Byzantines used for exorcism?
Of which tradition? There are many traditions.
So we would use the same thing, though. It would be the church language. It would be
Old
Old
Slavonic.
Slavonic, which
Well, we
yeah.
used all Church Slavonic for all the services. We didn't change to Ukrainian.
Probably the same reason, as what Chris said, that it's for the dead language. That's all I know.
Right, and to my understanding, the rite of exorcism for in the Roman Catholic Church is still according to the rite of exorcism from 1614, which would have been in Latin.
Right.
So it hasn't changed since then, and it's what they still use to this day.
Right. I've done exorcism prayers in English, but only because it's part of the sacrament of baptism. But that's not really an actual, driving out the devil.
That's the
someone's
exorcism,
possessed.
and it's real.
Yeah, but that's, but I mean, we're not dealing with an adult who's possessed, and we have to hide use the dead language for them.
Well, my understanding too is that I didn't know if there was anything inherent about Latin. I thought it was more just like the fact that it was the old liturgical books and stuff like that.
I don't know. I don't know anything about this at all.
Yeah.
So I'm really not the one.
I know the chief exorcist of the Vatican made the comment in one of his books that in certain exorcisms the devil would make fun if they weren't using Latin. He would say
It doesn't count.
I don't know.
I don't know. That's all stuff I don't know.
I don't think it depends on the language. I don't think it depends on language.
But in a Western church, where people don't know Latin anymore,
It may have been because they weren't using the authentic rite.
Oh.
And so
They would be using a modified rite that actually wasn't a true exorcism for someone who's possessed. And that's why the devil would mock them.
Adam just made the good point that, the three languages that were baptized on the cross were
Latin, Hebrew, and Greek.
exactly. So I mean, with the power of the cross and
Yeah.
the sacrifice, it more than speaks to the importance and the place.
I'll
of
ask
Latin.
the exorcist for the archdiocese this one, and I'll bring it in next week.
We have one more comment back here, Father.
Yeah.
I was actually curious about this as well, and I did my own little research when I was converting into the faith.
Uh-huh.
And I found out that there's a priest that has to ask the bishop for permission to investigate cases of possession.
Right.
And then they go through the thorough investigation
Right.
before the actual rite of exorcism.
Well, actual rite of exorcism is the last thing.
it is the last thing.
Yeah, 'cause you have to make sure that there's no fraud or deceit or
Or mental
psychological, right? Yeah.
And that it's all done in that for obviously the purposes that Jesus was crucified, and the name above it was in Latin, Greek, Hebrew, but also that it's to also communicate more fully in the language of the church because of the liturgy of the litanies that it also contains of the saints and their intercession.
And the what?
Intercessions.
Oh, intercession. Okay, good, thank you. Thank all of you. If one does not feel sorrow or feels indifferent to sins, but still realizes that they are offensive to God, can they be forgiven? You have to be sorry. You can come in with an intellectual understanding that, yes, it violates God's commandments or church law, but you have to be sorry. If you're not sorry, we can't forgive. So it's just like if you weren't, if you broke up or had an argument between two people who are dating and you're not really sorry, the other person is going to be deeply offended by that. So you have to be sorry.
How does that work with those that have like the actual physical inability to feel sorrow? Like there are some with like sociopathy and psychopathy that physically do not have the capability to feel sorrow.
Like a sociopath?
Yes.
Sociopath wouldn't go to confession in the
Well,
first
I
place.
know, but if they decided to, where they can't physically feel sorrow, how would that affect the way the church?
It's not physical; it's mental.
We.
You have to.
Yeah. Well,
truly be sorry.
in the same argument, if they do not have the faculties to feel sorrow, how would that?
I don't know. I think that you're in a roundabout because someone like that is not going to come to a priest looking to be forgiven because they don't believe they've done anything wrong.
Okay.
They don't feel any regret, and they don't understand why it's offensive to God. Somebody like that, they don't get it. To them, the Ten Commandments are nothing.
Yeah.
I was going to say a quick comment. Neurologically, if they're not able to feel sorrow, I think there's like some sort of like spiritual anguish that I guess would have to come about in this situation. They'd have to know like deep down, like in their heart of hearts, that this is repugnant in terms of what they've done. So, but then it gets dicey. But.
So where in this context is consciousness?
See, I think that's
and what
like
is consciousness?
A person's
is
conscience.
Is it something that you understand, or is it something that really hurts
Conscience or consciousness?
Conscience.
Conscience.
Yeah.
Conscience.
Is it okay? So
They have to have a conscience, and a sociopath doesn't.
No, really? I heard that the conscience was brought in by the bad people in order to mock the good ones.
Conscience is brought in by bad people.
The product of the bad people in order to mock the good ones.
What about something like fear of hell as like a motivator? You know what I mean?
Like what?
Fear of hell as a motivator. Because there's like imperfect contrition, which is like fear of
Yeah,
hell.
which would be fear of hell, and it's imperfect.
But imperfect still allows them to be forgiven even though it's imperfect, right?
Within
context, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
within the context.
Okay.
Is Cardinal Dolan really visiting in January?
We will see what arrangements we can make. We're not making any promises.
That guest bedroom in the rectory, has that been finished?
No.
Yeah.
It's not drunk yet.
You want to put the cardinal in? What was the most challenging part of seminary?
Kitchen.
What?
What?
Kitchen.
Oh.
Kitchen.
Do you mean the food or?
No, the place. I mean, it's a question about the place, right?
What is the most
walk in the morning for you?
Did you have to work in the kitchen?
Oh, when I started, we started in the boxes for builders because the seminary was just about to be built.
Right. So the kitchen was worse than that.
The kitchen was what?
Was worse than that?
No, actually, it was, we didn't have to do
They
anything.
lived in boxcars.
Right.
So there
When the
was, so
seminary
the
started.
kitchen was so small that we didn't have to work. Actually, we were eating things that were sent from United States to help. The humanitarian help, they were just opening cans or doing something really fast. But now a lot of seminaries, they do a lot of work in the kitchen. They wash the dishes, they serve, they help a lot. As I was in the seminary, and, you know, attending the lunches, and they have a lot to do. And you know, if someone is really in a bad grace, the kitchen is the
I didn't have to do that. But the hardest part in seminary for me was some of the classes in very abstract theology. I had a horrible time. And then to make it worse, the examination was an oral one-on-one with the professor. And I had studied and studied and studied, and I just didn't understand it. And he gave me a B because he knew I had worked so hard and because I was sweating so much. So I was such a wreck. So, yeah, it was Karl Rahner's theology, my God. And what was comforting was, Karl Rahner was one of the big minds of the German church after World War II. And what was interesting was his brother was also a Jesuit and came to Catholic University the year after I studied Rahnerian theology, and they asked Hugo Rahner, what do you think of your brother Karl's theology? And he said, I'm waiting for it to be translated into good German. So I felt much better. So I was reading it in English, and yeah. In another video by Bishop Kurt, he assured the viewers that there was no discord at the synod. How do you understand these comments in the light of news reports about a letter, some of the 40 bishops, including Cardinal Dolan? I know what you're referring to, that a letter was supposedly written by 40 bishops, including Cardinal Dolan, saying that, asking the Holy Father, to keep the faith. Yeah, the synod has been interesting. You want to pop that one? You don't? Sure? Okay.
That was my last question.
Oh, you're the one who asked the question. Ah. You little stinker. Well, I think that, something happened with this letter. It goes back to last year. Remember last year, halfway through the synod, they came out and the news reports were all about the church is going to be much more welcoming of homosexual persons, and church is going to work on divorce remarriage and get people back to the sacraments faster and more easily. And then when it ended, that's not what they wrote at all. It was a totally different thing. Then this spring or summer, they did the secret. When was it they did that secret meeting in Rome? Cardinal Casper.
I think that was almost last fall.
No, it was this year. It's
Oh, was
this
it?
year.
Well, it was early
Then this year, Cardinal Casper, who's promoting the faster track to get people back to communion if they're divorced and remarried, he and a number of the German bishops, they had their own mini synod at one of the colleges in Rome without the Pope's knowledge, which is never a good thing to do, because Francis may be a very loving grandfather type, but he's still the Pope, and I'm guessing he was not real happy with it. There is still a lot of discord. I think there's still a lot going on behind the scenes that they're hashing out.
I was just surprised by his saying that.
Now, see, he said it was the English language. He didn't experience any discord among the English bishops. That's who his language group is. You're divided into language groups. And it's the main languages of the world. So it's English, French, Spanish, German. And you go from whatever country you came from, that you go to that group of the language you speak, not the church you're from, not the regional church you're from. I think that's the issue.
I see. Oh, that would make sense.
Because in the German language group, there's a lot happening. And in the German newspaper reports, there's a lot coming from Rome of debating going on. So, and those are the only two groups that I followed, though. I don't know anything about the Italian, Spanish, or French.
The French are having problems too, because they have those very leftist bishops that are basically, they're sort of aligning with the Germans about, well, you know, certain church teachings should only be regional and stuff like that.
Yeah, you can't do regional decisions, because that's when you end up with schism. That's what the conservative German bishops are saying. If you do it by region, well, here in this part of the world, we're going to do it because we have these big social issues and theological issues. So in our part of the church, we're going to do it differently. You can't do that and then have the rest of the church on a different course for the sacraments. That's impossible. You're no longer Catholic. You become Protestant. Then you can't do that at all. And we're just going to have to wait and see what they call the Instrumentum Laboris will be published on. We'll go to the Pope on Sunday, and then the Pope will go through it, and then he'll issue from there. What's interesting is the German bishops have been bringing up the Eastern churches, okay? Because second marriages and third marriages are allowed in the Orthodox Church. So everybody thinks that's great. But if you get married a second time in the Orthodox Church, the priest wears dark vestments, and the reading is in the epistle is about it is better to marry than to burn. And the priest's prayer is, behold this couple who, because they could not restrain themselves and contain their sexual passions, now are coming to you asking for your blessing in spite of their weakness and sinfulness. And then you can't go to the communion for a year. And the next time, the prayers are worse, and it's extended by a couple of years. And you have to do penance the whole time. That's what's going on.
Can you clarify, when you say like second marriage, do you mean like their original spouse is still living?
Still living, right. Yeah.
This is on a paper. It corresponds, but in reality, it's not.
In Ukraine.
In reality, it's not in Ukraine. For example, you go to the chancery, you pay a certain amount of money, you get a divorce, you can marry second time, third time, fourth time.
For the Orthodox, yeah. Up to the fourth time still. They still.
I don't know. I think you can marry as many times as you wish.
My God.
So this is
joke.
Is maybe in the theological books, but not in the rubric.
Yeah, that's in the books. That's the rubric book.
Right.
Yeah.
So if they were not married through the Orthodox Church at first, do they still have to go through that same process if they're getting remarried, but their first time through the Orthodox Church?
Orthodox Church will only marry you if you're both Orthodox.
Right, but if you were married not through the church beforehand, and you were openly, I was married, through the court system and so forth, got divorced, but you were never married through the church. Do you still have to go through that same process if you're getting remarried and it's your first time?
I don't know Orthodox marriage law well enough.
Okay.
Yeah, I really don't. So I don't know if they have the same setup that we have, where we would recognize it as valid if they're both baptized Christians. I think the Orthodox
were person baptized when?
Yeah, they're baptized, but they just didn't ever do the sacrament of marriage. They were married through, like the court system, just outside of the church. But they were both baptized.
I think the Orthodox would require they be married in church for it to be a church.
It depends on the circumstances. What were the circumstances? Were they,
Or you're just asking in general?
Yeah, just in general. I was wondering if the Orthodox Church would make them still go through the same process of that.
Yeah. You first, then over this way. Yeah.
Are the subsequent marriages considered sacramental marriages in the Orthodox Church?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, because you are allowed to go to Holy Communion.
There is
after
official divorce.
Oh.
Official divorce.
They don't give annulment.
You go, you pay money, and you get it. Yeah,
Wow.
That's scandalous.
You get it without anything.
That's really scandalous. Well, no wonder, I'll bet that's what the Germans are pushing for, the liberal Germans, I would say. Liberal Germans, not the conservative, and then you.
Does that tradition of like wearing the dark vestments and doing the dark
No one
ceremony
does that.
carry over to Eastern Catholic Church?
No, because in the Eastern Catholic Church, it's just like in the Roman Catholic Church, to have a second marriage while your former spouse is alive, it has to be annulled.
Okay.
There is no second marriage.
Right,
Yeah.
so it's not a second marriage.
The first one didn't exist.
If that marriage didn't exist, then you can get married.
Yeah.
Only once. If you annul the marriage only once, there is no second. If that marriage didn't work, it doesn't matter whether it was good or not even existed. You cannot get married anymore.
I just think it's really important to like say that that is the Orthodox teaching. They're in schism and they're in heresy, and that is
Not heresy,
I mean,
schism.
in that regard, that like that's a.
Well, we never said that.
Okay, well, I didn't say that either. Then I take that back. I didn't say that. I just mean that
Dump the tape.
that is not a Catholic teaching that like you can be married like more than
And
once.
you know where it comes from? The Byzantine Empire. Because the emperor would divorce his wife because he saw some lady in the imperial court and he wanted her, and the patriarch was pressured, but he did give in. That's the danger of church and state being intertwined like that.
So yeah, I apologize for saying that. I didn't mean that. I guess I just meant like it's really important that like it doesn't matter if the Orthodox do it because we're Catholic. Like that breaks so much theology.
Yep. Having one central teaching office is really important. Yes.
So just to clarify as well, we don't recognize the subsequent Orthodox marriages, right? Like just the church in general, the Catholic Church doesn't recognize those as valid marriages.
No.
Like they would never be
No.
allowed
Okay.
back to.
Because I was like,
We would deal only with the first marriage.
We would still do the ligament according to the canon law.
Explain
What is
that,
that?
please.
Like
I'll be right
you would
back.
still need to file all the subsequent marriages, and all the whether they were dissolved or not, but they would need to be
yeah.
they need to be done by the canonist
Okay.
at the tribunal before the annulment of all of those subsequent marriages. They are not valid, but they still should be valid.
Yeah,
No.
this is the next one.
What? I don't understand.
Do you want to know what the eschatological teaching of the church is? Like the four last things?
What is the correct Catholic eschatological doctrine? So,
All right. What does the Catholic Church teach about like the end of times?
Oh. I didn't know.
Wait for Father Chris on that one.
Yeah.
Okay, we can move on.
Oh, Matthew 23:9. Call no man father.
Call no man father.
This is actually yours, Daniel.
Is it? Oh.
Oh yeah.
I just, oh no, I shouldn't have drank all that coffee because I'm losing my voice now. It's terrible.
One
So,
sentence. Go.
what?
One sentence.
One sentence. You're misinterpreting what Jesus is saying. You're misconstruing the point of that passage in Scripture. What he's referring to, in sort of the whole general thing, is the emphasis, or rather the overemphasis that's put on like a particular office. What Jesus is saying could also be applied to sort of obsessing over the role of a rabbi, not in a spiritual sense, but also in a very mortal and prideful way. And what he's getting at here is that it's evident that Christ establishes the priesthood when he charges his apostles at the end of the Gospels before he ascends into heaven, like lays hands and breathes on them. It's very apparent when he tells them that whoever sins you forgive are forgiven, whoever sins you that are retained are attained, that the role of the priesthood is established there.
I don't know, I just kind of comment. I always sort of understood it to be as like calling no man father, like as you would call like God father.
Right, right, exactly, and it's about the prideful elevation of an individual to a status that is godlike. But if you want to take it that literally, then you should never call your biological dad father ever, or anyone else.
All the fatherhood proceeds from the
Exactly.
Father, right? And we were created in His image and likeness, so we cooperate with the Father, right? In the in the couples, but the spiritual Father, spiritual Father, the priest represents, he represents the Christ, and the Christ is the image of the Father during the liturgy and the sacrament. So he is called in a spiritual sense. He is a spiritual Father, right?
Right, exactly.
Call no man Father.
What end times? It wasn't I thought it was the four last things.
And historically, all you have to do is go read the letters of St. Ignatius of Antioch and what he writes about the priesthood. Like, he's the man that walked with Saints Peter and St. John. Like, he was bishop of Antioch. He had no problem referring to himself as a bishop. He knew what his role was within the church. And we know historically that even after the immediate end of the apostolic age, so to speak, that the priesthood and understanding the priest as a spiritual father has been around since Christ ordained the apostles.
And St. Paul.
Exactly. St. Paul calls Timothy his son.
And over he says, I'm your father in Christ
Yeah.
in the epistles.
So,
This is what happens when you choose one verse,
yeah.
not the whole picture.
Yeah.
And usually you know who does that? Former Catholics who are not catechized.
Also isn't it like when they're talking about Lazarus and stuff, where whatever the rich man in hell is like, isn't there one where like in the New Testament where he's talking
Father
to
Abraham.
yeah, he calls him by Father Abraham, and
Yeah.
Christ himself says that, and it's like, I don't know what you want.
Yeah.
I don't.
Is that good? I don't know who asked that. You don't have to out yourself, but cool.
Okay.
Back to you, Father.
What is the correct Catholic eschatological doctrine? Okay, so our guess is what you want to know is versus rapture. I mean, correct Catholic eschatology is the Son of Man will come at the end of time in power and glory, and then those who are alive will be taken up into heaven, and those, who are condemned will go to hell. The rapture, as is taught in the United States, is an American invention, an American Protestant
What is the
invention.
rapture?
The rapture, somebody tell Father what the rapture is.
So it was like the mid 1800s that it sort of came about as a Protestant doctrine. It was the idea that the end of times is sort of signaled with all of the faithful on earth are suddenly like taken up into heaven, but Christ doesn't come back at this point. And then there's sort of a period of tribulations when the beast that's referenced in Revelations comes to earth and persecutes those who convert to Christianity or whatever after everyone else is taken up. And then at the end of all of this, then Christ comes back.
Wow.
Yeah. But like I said, but historically it
It's the best answer of all.
but historically it was started by, or this doctrine was propagated by one pastor in the middle of the 19th century.
It's interesting as well because like their guidelines for it is that just that you know Jesus and that you know who he is. You don't actually have to really do anything. As long as you know of him, then you're going to go up in like some Protestant churches I've heard personally that have said like you all of a sudden get this perfect body, like physical body, and like all these things happen to you and like you get into a mode of perfection and then go up. But it's like a legit, literal thing. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah.
I can't. I don't understand it.
But no, you have the correct response, Father.
Wow.
No, but also it's just like like whenever the rapture happens, like all the faithful just instantly just get raptured and like disappear. It's like kind of hilarious.
It's kind of like
Somebody
you
once-
teleport.
My friend is like, oh yeah, my boss like really believes in the rapture, and he's like, oh, you better learn how to drive my truck because like, one day at work I would just like get raptured and this.
Crack the wheel.
That's really scary.
That's interesting. He presumes he will be raptured. Right? He presumes he's going to be raptured. That's that presumption. You know, because I accept Jesus as my Lord and Savior, therefore I'm saved.
And
I'm taken up.
So it's like during the Acts of the Apostles that the Philip or whoever evangelized the
Eunuch from
the
Ethiopia.
eunuch, yeah, and then he was raptured or taken away.
Well, yeah, except God takes them to work someplace else on
Right,
earth. Yeah, but that's what they believe, is that someday all of the righteous will disappear from the planet, and the Catholics and everyone else will be left behind. and you know what? I have to say that I thought that it was a half-truth, that if you accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior, that then you don't have to do anything else, just accept that. And I thought that really can't be. I mean, these people do read the Bible, but that is what they really do believe. I had the opportunity to ask a couple of evangelical ministers, and they said, "Oh yeah." And I said, "What about all the sins? What if you commit sins after? No, it's okay." And I said, "Are you serious?" "Oh yeah, it's great." I said, "Well, obviously it's great. You can get away with murder."
And I forget the name of the book, but I believe Scott Hahn wrote it, and it's sort of like the history of Protestant eschatology. And what's interesting about all of these incorrect views of the end times is that the people who write them obviously buy into it, they believe what they're writing, and so they end up sort of living their lives as if like it's the rapture is about to happen. I mean, we're obviously given the charge by Christ that, you know, no one knows the time or the hour, it comes like a thief in the night, but they obsess over it, and it consumes their lives, and they bring their families into this, and ends up very destructive. But I have to find the name of it. One of my good friends read through it, and really...
Will Catholics be left behind?
I don't know. I'd have to double check. Andre was...
That would be a good one. Will Catholics be left behind? That's a good book.
It's a good book. By Carl...
Olson,
yeah.
Okay.
Put out by Ignatius.
I don't know if that's the one. Andre was the one who's reading it. But anyway, no, these people, it consumes everything about their lives, and they cease to be productive, I guess. And not in just the sense of like having a job and taking care of their family, but it almost becomes like a psychological distress for them. So, just an interesting thing about it.
Good.
I have to find the name of the book.
How do we respond when someone brings up the atrocious actions of the church in the past, such as the killing of Native Americans and the sexual abuse of children by priests, as reasons why the church is not holy or good? This just came up because it's October, and so UNM had Indigenous Day instead of Columbus Day. That's why you don't get Columbus Day off from school, because it's Indigenous Day for, you know, mourning what Columbus did to the Indians and everybody who followed him. So, you know, all religious bodies have skeletons in their closet, number one. Number two, if you're going to focus on a specific issue like the sexual abuse, you know, all of the countries where it has been reported, the number of priests involved in it is less than the number of pedophiles in the general population. So it's 1.5 to 2.5% of American Catholic priests engaged in sexual abuse of children from the 50s through the 90s. But if you look at the general population as a whole, the percentage of pedophiles is higher than that among men. And if you go to Orthodox Jews in some neighborhoods of New York and outside of New York, their rates are very high of sexual abuse of children by rabbis and men who are respected in the synagogue. There's always going to be sinners in a church. No religious body is exempt from that. The Catholic Church is a house for sinners. It is not a house for saints, and it has never claimed to be. Now, the Catholic Church, at the same time, looking at the other example given, the killing of Native Americans, the Church never condoned the killing of Native Americans. The French in Canada and the Spanish throughout the empire when they would enslave Indians or engage in slaughtering Indians, it was always against church law, because after more explorers came following Columbus's path, and they realized that this was not some islands on the way to China, but they had bumped into something very big and people that they had never seen before, because they already had people that sailed the other way around the world to the Philippines. They're going up and down the coast running into this. So they went to Rome. Are these people human? And if they are, what level of protection are they guaranteed? Bartolomé de las Casas is the most famous of the Spanish friars who went out to protect and intervene, and the King of Spain passed laws forbidding this. But just because you pass a law forbidding it doesn't mean people are going to stop doing it. That's why we have laws, because people do these things over and over again. So the church as church never has condoned the exploitation of the blacks in Africa or the Indians in the Americas. It's been the opposite. The church as church always stands for human rights. All the human rights stuff we have now, that we take as part of our democratic liberal heritage as a republic, that comes out of Catholicism. All of that was hashed out in the Catholic Church. Not by the Lutherans, but by the Catholics. So that's your answer. Okay? And people, they'll choose like the Inquisition. Remember, the Inquisition was very legalistic. There were far fewer people killed by the Inquisition than is claimed. Far, far fewer. It was in less than 10,000 over a very long span of Spanish history. The Inquisition actually, when it worked properly in the Spanish Empire and in Rome, the Inquisition had a lot of protections built in, all right, to shield people from false accusations. That was a big thing. People were always hauled before the Inquisition because somebody wanted their property, or somebody wanted, they wanted the daughter, or something like that.
And they were frequently more lenient and understanding.
Inquisitional laws and punishments were much less than civil law of the time. Civil law of the time was much harsher. So I'm going to hold on to this one because I'll post on the internet. I'll post on Facebook, and I'll post about some books that you can read that are a good, easy read that give you the ammunition you would need for that. Is the German church tax appropriate, and do you think Catholics in Germany would benefit from its abolishment? In a lot of the countries of Central Europe, especially Germany and Austria, after the governments, the different kingdoms, governments confiscated church land, the church depended on income from these forests, mines, and farming to pay for the salaries of the clergy, the parish clergy, and also the upkeep of monasteries and convents, the schools, the hospitals, the homes for the aged, and so forth. So after that was confiscated, the two compromises that these different states made was, one, the state will pay the salary of the clergy, all right, which is never a good thing, because then the clergy loses its independence. And two, the tax. You write down in Germany or Austria, you mark in a box what religion you are and where you want your tithing to go, to what church. The Roman Catholic, the Evangelical is the big Protestant church. That's where they get most of their income. They don't do collections in the pews in Catholic churches in the German-speaking countries. It comes from your income tax. The problem is this, that if you officially withdraw from the church because you do not want to pay that tax, or because you're making a statement that you're against something the church is doing or saying, especially when the sexual abuse was revealed in Germany, it was a huge scandal in Catholic Germany, as in Catholic Ireland. Those people's names are then sent to the local parish, and the local parish is told they no longer consider themselves Catholic. Under the Concordat agreement, that parish cannot give those people sacraments anymore, except communion and confession. But they can't get married, and they'll be denied a church burial. They'll even be denied anointing of the sick. So it's a really lousy system, so that they would be better off if it was abolished and they went back to just collections. Yeah.
I would like to point out that that doesn't exist in Bavaria.
Oh,
Yeah.
what does Bavaria do? Bavaria is the majority Catholic state.
Yeah, but it's also a free state, so they don't have to listen to the
Oh,
laws.
that's right, they're a free state. Yeah.
So they don't have the tax law or anything like that.
So Bavaria is supported by collections? Okay. I did not know that. Good for the Bavarians.
Well, the kingdom.
Yeah, they didn't want to be, when after World War I, Bavaria wanted out of Germany, and after World War II, Bavaria wanted out of Germany. They didn't like what they were being dragged into, twice. So, but yeah, it's a better thing to have it abolished, because then you have, I mean, you know, the rancor it causes in the family. You go to get dad buried, and the priest says, well, he didn't pay his church income tax for 5 years. I can't bury him. That sucks. Beyond sucks. People never forget stuff like that. How do we respond when someone says there's no such thing as miracles? Anybody? Want to grab that?
I mean,
Go.
I volunteered.
You had to work through all of this. Yeah. Those of you who don't know, how many have been in Cafe just this semester? Okay, and how many just last year? Okay. See, he was the one who had asked these questions. We would be on something else entirely. And Daniel would say, but Father, in 1 Kings, it says thus and so. And I would go, my God, he is a thorn in my flesh. God gave him to me. Never in the first 2 years did I think he would ever become a Byzantine Catholic. Then the 3rd year I thought, oh yeah, we're reeling him in. We got him. We got him.
So, why
miracles? So I guess one thing, we'll jump back to why the relics and the saints, and why the Catholic Church can like definitively say this person is in heaven and their intercession is efficacious. So when the Catholic Church is going through the process of canonizing somebody, when they look for these miracles, they don't just try and like scrape the bottom of the barrel and be like, that is just sketchy enough that we could probably pass it off as a miracle. It goes through a very rigorous process. There are medical professionals who examine these cases. There are doctors who go and look at them themselves. They speak with the families and establish histories about this. This is a very intensive machine that works through these, and is probably, it's probably why, if you're wondering why a particular venerable or a blessed takes so long to become canonized, is because they take it very seriously. They don't just hand out the title saint willy-nilly. It's a very grave, not grave matter, but serious matter. It's a very serious matter. So as a result, one thing I would say is go and read the cases of what led to the canonization of some of the saints. Go and read the histories behind these people and understand, okay, there is something that is beyond the physical means of modern medicine and of physical therapy to rehabilitate these individuals. But even further of that, like the prime miracle, the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. So let's assume for a moment that Jesus didn't actually rise from the dead. The apostles all made it up. His corpse is somewhere in the world. This isn't true. So what's interesting about this then is that we have to presume then that the gospel accounts are all fabrications, and that the hundreds of people who would see Christ after his resurrection all suddenly experienced a mass hallucination across a very geographic area, as well as despite their their varied ethnicities, because this was Palestine, and especially Jerusalem this time, was a major hub of trading, and that somehow they all experienced the exact same hallucination of the exact same time, that this one particular man appeared to them. Let's take that a little bit further and then say, okay, the 12 apostles, 13 including St. Paul, all of them didn't actually see Jesus. However, they were so committed to this that they would then endure some of the most horrific punishments that the Roman Empire at this time could possibly conceive. They were more than willing to be beheaded, drugged through the streets with a rope around their neck until they died, flayed, maimed, and subject to terrible, terrible punishments. And all they had to do was recant and denounce Jesus of Nazareth. That's it. That's all they had to do. I think that the witness of these martyrs, and then the martyrs immediately after them, and then the martyrs immediately after them, and the martyrs after them, and the martyrs all the way up until now, more than attest to the miracle of not only the resurrection, but to the truth and the veracity of who Jesus Christ actually was. And that's sort of, I mean, if St. Paul says himself, if Christ didn't rise from the dead, then we have no purpose, that we shouldn't be here. We've spent our lives in vain. So that's sort of a long roundabout way, but that's what I would say. If you don't believe in miracles, well, then you have to prove to me that there are way too many people who lied about Jesus coming back from the dead in the early church. Jeremiah and then Chris.
I have a question about
Go for it.
the saints.
Uh-huh.
Does the Catholic Church acknowledge the Orthodox saints?
The ones that we've acknowledged are the ones that were canonized by the Russian Orthodox Church up to the year 1905. Because there was, that's when there was this movement of Orthodox who became Byzantine Catholics in Russia, in the Russian Empire. And that was one of the big questions. Can we keep them on the calendar or not? And Rome's answer was yes, they could all be kept. We've not done that though with any other Orthodox church. Officially, right. Everybody keeps the same saints up until about the year 1200, before the year 1200, because the Orthodox did not accept Francis of Assisi. So, through the 1100s, everybody has this, recognizes each other's saints, and then, but the only big Orthodox church where we've done that with a list of Orthodox saints is the Russians, because of that circumstance. So they are still on the Byzantine calendar, saints like Seraphim of Sarov and Abraham of Pototsk and Rostov and places like that. So, yeah, we do.
And with recent Christian persecutions in Ukraine and in Syria, those Coptic Christians and Orthodox Christians, where does the Catholic Church stand as far as martyrdom and...
Yeah, the Coptic Church canonized them, because they were martyrs for Christ, the men that were beheaded on the shore of the Mediterranean. This was obvious.
Differences.
But we don't officially, we don't have theological differences anymore with the Coptic Church, but we would not automatically list those men on our calendar, no.
It doesn't mean that we have any less respect for them. There's a lot of local saints that are perhaps Orthodox, but that the local Catholic churches would have a lot of respect for. So the Coptic Catholics would obviously have a lot of respect and may even see those men as saints, but they're not
going to put them on their calendar.
Yeah.
Canonizing people doesn't make them saints.
They were saints
in each other's church.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's rare. Okay. But we don't denigrate them. We don't put them down. We don't question the validity of the Orthodox Church canonizing somebody. Right? We don't say, well, let's see if it matches to our standard. We don't do that. Okay? Because we're sister churches in faith. Okay?
Chris, did you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add something to the miracles. Probably, I guess you could say in quote-unquote, modern times, is just to look at Our Lady of Fatima, because even the events of Fatima were reported in secular...
Anti-religious
newspapers. So that's got to give some weight to have, communist newspapers essentially report on these miracles. Yeah.
And
now let me just hop in. An interesting thing, when the Reformation started, one of the big things they said was the age of miracles is over. Okay, because they were questioning medieval mind. accepting miracles, okay? So then all of the churches that have come out of the Reformation, all the denominations, okay, that the age of miracles is over. But now, and of course relics, right? Burned them. They actually would burn relics of the saints. But now, you can order a handkerchief that a Pentecostal TV minister has prayed over, and that handkerchief, and you order that for $25 plus $3.95 shipping, and you can get that, and it will be a source of miracles to you today, that handkerchief. I promise you, as God is my witness. And I would stick with the chip of bone that we started off with rather than that guy's handkerchief. But it's interesting that they've come full circle. There is a need to believe that God is present in the world and active in the world, and that he will suspend his own physical laws in order to do something that will bring people closer to faith.
It's 8 o'clock. I forgot what time do we have to stop?
Is it 8 right now?
Yeah.
8 o'clock.
Do we have to stop at 8?
I have one last question, Bob.
I think, I was gonna say, we had one more in the cut.
No, we had already answered it.
Oh,
I just put
perfect.
it back.
Okay. So Billy and I were actually talking about this. So the other books of Esdras, like where you get like the Archangel Uriel and stuff like that, why are those?
They're not canonical.
Why?
Because even for the Jews, they really weren't canonical. That's literature, apocalyptic literature that was written in a particular era. And
It's
we don't.
questionable.
Yeah, it is questionable. So it was never put into the canon of the Bible by Christians.
So would it be something that we shouldn't read or tread lightly, sort of?
You tread lightly.
Okay.
I mean, you can read it, but just tread lightly, and remember that it's,
Okay.
the church has decided it is not of divine inspiration.
Okay.
You can read it, like the Shepherd of Hermas, the early church questioned some of the early letters, like Pope Clement, the successor of Peter, are his letters worthy of being incorporated into the epistles? No, they're beautiful, spiritual, but they're not of divine origin.
Okay.
Oh gosh, I had 2 questions I wanted to ask. Is it okay if we ask them and you can try and answer them in like,
Go
just
for
like
it.
as simply as possible?
Yeah.
One, why does it matter your denomination if you accept Christ as like your savior? I just like really simply
Among
like,
Protestants, why does it matter?
yeah, I guess I mean like in general, like why would you have to believe in like a certain set of teachings if Christ wants to save all of his people?
Well, I mean, if it would come down to only that, then you wouldn't need any other set of teachings. You can throw out the commandments for that matter, which apparently many of them are due. All right, by continuing to sin once they've accepted Jesus as their Lord and Savior.
Okay. Second question. Why should you not say that Vatican II is a bad council that isn't right?
Because it's an ecumenical council of the church that was called under a pope, was finished under a pope, and nothing in the council documents is wrong. It's how people implemented them in Western Europe and North America that was wrong and caused the liturgical mess that we have in so many countries, which has led to, therefore, weakening of faith in so many countries, by not giving people proper catechesis. John Paul II, when he was Archbishop of Krakow, he was in charge of implementing the Vatican II reforms in Poland. The Polish church kept all its devotions and so forth intact. He oversaw all of that, the changes that took place, and they kept the church not only alive, but flourishing in a very hostile country. And if that had been done in Germany and Western Europe, Canada, America, we wouldn't have half the problems we have now.
Thank you.
Okay? All right,
There was-
good. Yep. Oh,
There's
there was
one more that was sitting over there. I don't know if you could answer it quickly enough.
Does the church have an official position on marijuana? No, we don't. That was easy. Is it only a matter of being illegal under man, or would its legality not make a difference? What the position of the church would be is something that's mind altering. You don't play with it. All right, you don't use. You just don't. You know, if you're somebody who cannot take more than one drink, then you should not have the drink. And nobody should be taking marijuana. As the son of a cop, my father did drug intervention for many years. Marijuana almost always led people into Harvard drugs, and the marijuana of today is 10.5 times more potent than the marijuana of when I was in high school. And that's why you have people in Colorado jumping off ledges after getting high, because it's a much more potent marijuana. When they're talking about legalizing marijuana, it's a bunch of guys who are my age or older who think it's going to be cool to do, and the young people who will vote for them, it's asinine to do, because you're just opening yourself up for long-term problems. So, how was that for a quick answer?
There you go, perfect. All right, that's it.
That's it.
Perfect, thank you so much, Father, I appreciate you taking